My name is David. I'm 42 years old, and I used to believe that once you found your place in life, everything else would fall into line. I was wrong. Sometimes the foundation cracks in places you don't notice until the structure starts to collapse. When I moved into the apartment next to Sarah, I was just looking for peace after my divorce. The kind of peace that comes from starting over in a city where nobody knows your story. My ex-wife had taken everything, not just the house and the savings, but the version of myself I thought I'd be forever. I was a man rebuilding from rubble, and this modest apartment in Brooklyn felt like neutral ground. Sarah was married to Marcus, a corporate executive who was never home. Their daughter, Emma, was 16 at the time, quiet, withdrawn, always studying behind closed doors with headphones on, lost in her own world. I'd see them in the hallway sometimes. Sarah's tired smile that never quite reached her eyes, Emma's distant nod as she hurried past with her backpack slung over one shoulder. The first real conversation I had with Sarah happened on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. We were both checking our mailboxes in the lobby when she dropped an envelope. I picked it up and handed it to her, and she laughed, a sound that seemed surprised to escape her own lips. "Thank you. I'm Sarah, by the way. We're neighbors, but I don't think we've properly met." "David," I said, shaking her hand. "I moved in about 2 months ago." "Welcome to the building," she said, though her smile faltered. "Fair warning. The pipes are loud, and the landlord is terrible about fixing things." We started running into each other more often after that. Coffee in the lobby before work, brief exchanges about the weather, about the city, about nothing in particular. She told me once, standing by the elevator with 2 grocery bags in her arms, that she'd traded passion for security when she married Marcus. "Some days I wonder if it was worth it," she said, laughing it off as if it were a joke. But I saw the truth in her eyes. Marcus was successful and driven, but emotionally unavailable in the way that ambitious men often are. He traveled constantly, climbing the corporate ladder while his family waited in an apartment that felt more like a waiting room than a home. Sarah mentioned once that they used to talk about dreams, about traveling the world together. But those conversations had died years ago, replaced by discussions about bills and schedules and Emma's college applications. Emma was 20 when I started noticing the change. For years had passed since I'd moved in, and she transformed from a withdrawn teenager into a thoughtful young woman with her mother's warmth but none of her resignation. She'd returned from her first year of college different, more open, more willing to engage with the world around her. We'd run into each other at the coffee shop downstairs, a small place with mismatched chairs and local art on the walls. She was reading Dostoevsky one morning when I walked in. "Heavy reading for a Tuesday," I said, waiting for my order. She looked up and smiled. "Only way to start the day. Makes everything else seem easier by comparison." We started talking, just casual conversation about books, about life, about the strange loneliness of living in a city surrounded by millions of people. She listened in a way that made me feel less invisible in my own lonely existence. Not with the polite attention most people give, but with genuine interest, asking follow-up questions, remembering details from previous conversations. One evening, Sarah was away visiting her sister in Philadelphia. Emma knocked on my door around 8, holding a package that had been delivered to their apartment by mistake. "This is yours," she said, reading the label. "Amazon strikes again." "Thanks," I said, taking it from her. "How's the summer going?" We stood there in the doorway talking for 20 minutes about everything and nothing. Her internship at a nonprofit, her frustration with her father's constant absence, her mother's quiet sadness that nobody seemed to acknowledge. She spoke with an openness that caught me off guard, as if she'd been holding these thoughts in for too long and finally found someone who might understand. Before leaving, she paused at the threshold and said softly, "You seem like someone who understands what it's like to be alone." Those words stayed with me longer than they should have. I closed the door and stood in my empty apartment, surrounded by furniture that still felt temporary even after 4 years, and I realized she was right. I did understand, maybe too well. Over the next few weeks, Emma and I crossed paths more often. Coffee shop conversations turned into walks through the neighborhood, discussions about art, about dreams deferred, about the strange ways life doesn't turn out how you expect. Over the next few weeks, Emma and I crossed paths more often. Coffee shop conversations turned into walks through Prospect Park, discussions about art, about dreams deferred, about the strange ways life doesn't turn out how you expect. I told myself it was harmless, that I was just being a good neighbor, maybe even a mentor figure. But the truth is, I found myself looking forward to seeing her in ways that made me uncomfortable. She had this way of asking questions that cut through surface pleasantries. "Why did your marriage end?" she asked one afternoon as we sat on a bench watching dogs play in the park. Most people avoided asking directly, dancing around the topic with careful euphemisms. "We grew apart," I said, the standard answer. But she waited, silent, and somehow that silence demanded more honesty. I think we both wanted different versions of each other. She wanted someone more ambitious, more social. I wanted someone who could be content with quiet evenings and simple things. Eventually, we realized we were performing a marriage instead of living one. "That's what my parents do," she said quietly. "Perform. My dad performs the role of provider. My mom performs the role of satisfied wife. And I'm supposed to perform the role of grateful daughter who doesn't notice how empty it all is." I should have changed the subject. I should have created distance. But instead, I said, "What do you want instead?" "To feel something real," she answered, looking at me with an intensity that made my chest tighten. "To be around people who don't hide behind roles and routines." The conversations deepened. She told me about her father's broken promises, birthday dinners canceled because of emergency meetings, graduations attended but not remembered. She told me about her mother's prescription bottles, the ones Sarah thought no one noticed, the way happiness had become something chemically managed rather than genuinely felt. I shared things too, more than I should have. About the loneliness of divorce, about how failure in marriage makes you question everything about yourself, about the strange limbo of being middle-aged and starting over. She listened without judgment, and that absence of judgment became addictive. One night, everything shifted. I was reading on my balcony when I heard crying from the apartment next door. Emma appeared on her balcony, tears streaming down her face, phone clutched in her hand. She'd had another fight with her father over the phone. Another broken promise. Another missed birthday. He'd forgotten she was turning 21. Without thinking, I called out, "Are you okay?" She looked over, wiping her eyes. "Not really. My door's open if you need to talk." 10 minutes later, she knocked. She came in wearing sweatpants and an oversized college hoodie, eyes red, mascara smudged. We sat in my living room, the city lights flickering through the windows, and the silence felt heavy with all the unspoken things hanging between us. Her voice broke as she finally spoke. "David, I can't take it anymore. Living in that empty apartment, pretending we're a family when we're just strangers sharing space. My dad calls once a week like he's checking off a task. My mom smiles and says everything's fine while she takes pills to get through the day. And everyone acts like this is normal, like this is what life is supposed to be." I listened, my heart pounding, knowing I should create distance but unable to move. She looked at me with such raw vulnerability, like I was the only person in the world who could understand what she was feeling. "You're the only person who actually sees me," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "My father doesn't. He sees a responsibility, a checkbox on his list of things he's supposed to care about. My mother tries, but she's drowning in her own loneliness. But you listen. You ask questions. You remember things I've said. You make me feel like I matter." The words hung in the air between us, dangerous and intoxicating. I knew where this was heading. I could feel it in the way she was looking at me, in the charged silence that filled the space between her words. Then she leaned closer, her hand reaching for mine. Time slowed down. I saw everything that could happen, the line we were about to cross, the destruction that would follow. I saw Sarah's face, Marcus's handshake, the trust they'd placed in me as their neighbor, their friend. For a split second, I felt the pull, the temptation to let loneliness win, to take comfort where it was offered, to stop being the responsible one for just one night. I pulled back abruptly, standing up so fast I nearly knocked over my coffee table. Emma, no. This isn't right. Her face crumbled with embarrassment and pain.
I'm sorry.
I didn't mean to. I just thought. You should go, I said, my voice gentle but firm, even as my hands trembled. She stood up quickly, avoiding my eyes. I'm so sorry, David. I misread everything. I'm such an idiot. You're not an idiot. You're lonely and hurting, and I understand that. But this can't happen. She left without another word, and I heard her door close across the hall with a soft click that sounded like finality. I spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling, terrified by how close I'd come, how much I'd wanted to say yes. The next morning, the hallway encounters stopped. Emma avoided me completely, taking the stairs instead of the elevator, leaving early before I woke up, coming home late after I'd gone to bed. The coffee shop downstairs became a place I couldn't visit without looking around first, hoping and dreading in equal measure that I might see her there. When I saw Sarah in the lobby a few days later, she seemed oblivious to the tension that had poisoned the air between our apartments. She chatted cheerfully about the weather, about how Emma seemed stressed lately, probably just adjusting to being home for the summer. Marcus is in Seattle this week, she added with that practiced smile. Another merger. You know how it is. I nodded, pretending I knew, pretending everything was normal. But inside, the guilt was eating me alive. Every time I saw Sarah, I wanted to confess everything, to tell her that her daughter had reached out in desperation, that I'd almost failed them both, that the trust she'd placed in me as a neighbor and friend had been tested in ways she'd never know. The summer dragged on. I'd hear Emma's door open and close at odd hours. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of her in the parking lot, getting into her car quickly, never looking toward my window. The easy friendship we'd built over months had disintegrated in a single night, replaced by a shame so thick I could feel it through the walls. One evening in late July, Marcus came to my door. I froze when I saw him through the peephole, my heart hammering. Had Emma told him? Was this the confrontation I'd been dreading? But when I opened the door, he was smiling, holding a bottle of expensive scotch. David, hey, got a minute? We sat in my living room, the same room where everything had almost fallen apart, and he poured 2 glasses. I wanted to thank you, he said, settling into my couch. Sarah tells me you've been a good friend to her these past few years. And to Emma too. She mentioned you've talked books with her, given her advice about life. That means a lot, man. I know I'm not around much. I could barely meet his eyes. It's nothing, just being neighborly. No, it's more than that, he insisted. Emma's always been distant with me. I don't know how to connect with her the way I should. But Sarah says she lights up when she talks about your conversations. You've been more present for her this summer than I have, and I appreciate that. The scotch burned going down, but not as much as the words. I wanted to tell him he had it all wrong, that I wasn't the good neighbor he thought I was, that his daughter had cried in this very room and reached for something I'd almost given her. You're her father, I finally said. She needs you, not a neighbor who talks about books. He laughed, a sound tinged with sadness. Maybe, but lately I wonder if I've already lost that chance. She barely talks to me anymore, won't answer my calls half the time. He paused, staring into his glass. You ever feel like you've built this whole successful life, but somewhere along the way you forgot what it was all for? I looked at him then, really looked at him. Here was a man who had everything by conventional measures, success, money, a beautiful family, and yet he sat in my modest apartment drinking expensive scotch because he was just as lonely as the rest of us. Yeah, I said quietly. I know exactly what you mean. A month later, Emma moved out to attend graduate school in Boston. I heard the moving truck early on a Saturday morning. The sound of boxes being loaded, Sarah's voice calling out instructions. I stayed inside, watching from behind the curtain like a coward, until I heard the truck pull away. Sarah mentioned it casually a few days later in the lobby. House feels so empty now, she said, her smile not quite hiding the sadness. Emma's excited though. Fresh start, you know? She seemed ready to get away from here. The guilt doubled. Emma hadn't just left for school. She'd fled, escaped from the uncomfortable reality of what had almost happened between us. Months passed. The seasons changed. Fall arrived with its golden light and cooling air. I'd see Sarah occasionally, and she'd mention that Emma was doing well, thriving in Boston, barely coming home even for holidays. She texts me sometimes, Sarah said one afternoon, never asks about her father. It's like she's cut us both out. I accepted Emma's silence as punishment I deserved. Quiet, appropriate, endless. I stopped going to the coffee shop altogether, finding a new place 3 blocks away. I avoided the park where we'd walked. I erased the routes our friendship had traced through the neighborhood. Then one autumn morning, a letter arrived. No return address, just my name written in a familiar hand. My hands shook as I opened it, standing in my kitchen with morning light streaming through the window. Then one autumn morning, a letter arrived. No return address, just my name written in a familiar hand. My hands shook as I opened it, standing in my kitchen with morning light streaming through the window. The paper was simple, cream-colored stationery, and her handwriting was careful, measured, as if she drafted this letter multiple times before committing to the final version. David, it began. I don't blame you. I need you to know that first. I've spent these past months in Boston trying to understand what happened that night, and I've realized that I was lost and lonely, and you were the first person who made me feel like I mattered. Like I was more than just a disappointment to my father or a worry to my mother. You listened when no one else did. You saw me when I felt invisible. That night wasn't your fault. I put you in an impossible position, and you did the right thing by stopping me. Thank you for protecting me from myself, even when it would have been easier not to. I hope you find happiness, David. You deserve that much. You taught me something important, that sometimes the kindest thing someone can do is say no. I'm grateful for that lesson, even if it hurt at the time. Take care of yourself. Emma. I read those words until they blurred, until tears made the ink run at the edges. I realized then that loneliness had wounded both of us in different ways. She'd been searching for validation, for proof that she mattered to someone. I'd been searching for connection, for relief from the hollow ache of my failed marriage. We'd both been vulnerable, and we'd both come dangerously close to making a mistake that would have shattered multiple lives. I kept that letter in my desk drawer. Some nights, when the apartment felt especially empty, I'd take it out and read it again, reminding myself of the man I'd managed to be in that crucial moment, even when part of me wanted to be someone else. 2 years later, I ran into Emma at a bookstore in Manhattan. I was there for a weekend, browsing the philosophy section, when I heard someone say my name. I turned, and there she was, older now, more confident, with her hair shorter and her eyes brighter than I'd ever seen them. David, she said again, smiling. I thought that was you. We talked for 20 minutes, standing between the shelves. She told me about her doctorate program, about her research on urban isolation and community building. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. She turned her own experience of loneliness into something meaningful, something that might help others. I'm glad I ran into you, she said as we walked toward the exit together. I've wanted to say this in person for a long time. Thank you for being strong that night when I couldn't be. You could have taken advantage of the situation, and you didn't. That says everything about who you are. I nodded, fighting back tears, because we both understood how close we'd come to destroying everything. You deserved better than what I could have given you, I said. You deserved someone to protect you, even from your own pain. We both did, she replied softly. Sarah and Marcus eventually divorced. I heard about it from the landlord, who mentioned it casually while fixing my sink. Sarah had moved to a smaller apartment downtown, started painting again, rediscovered pieces of herself she'd buried for years during her marriage. We still have coffee sometimes, every few months, and she talks about finally feeling free, though the loneliness in her eyes remains, different now but still present. Marcus remarried within a year, someone younger, someone who didn't know yet about the empty promises and the endless business trips, starting the cycle all over again. Emma keeps her distance from him now, from what I understand, building a life on her own terms, learning to fill her own emptiness instead of looking for others to fill it for her. I'm still in the same apartment, still single, still learning to live with the weight of what almost happened. I date occasionally, careful conversations over dinner that rarely lead anywhere, because I've learned that loneliness makes poor decisions, and I'm trying to be more careful now. Some nights I think about that moment on my couch, Emma's hand reaching for mine, the terrifying pull of two lonely people seeking warmth in the wrong place. I think about how easy it would have been to say yes, to let one night of comfort erase the boundaries that should have protected us both. I learned something that night that has stayed with me through every lonely evening since. Loneliness doesn't just make us vulnerable, it makes us dangerous to each other. It whispers promises it can't keep, offers comfort that comes with devastating costs. It convinces us that any connection is better than no connection, that any warmth is better than the cold. Emma and I didn't cross that line, but we came close enough to see what lay on the other side, and that knowledge changed us forever. Some boundaries exist not because we don't want to cross them, but because crossing them would destroy the very things we're searching for: connection, trust, the possibility of genuine human warmth that doesn't come wrapped in shame and regret. That's something I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. The knowledge that I was tested and I passed, barely, but I passed. And in a world that often rewards taking what you want when you want it, sometimes the greatest act of love is the discipline to walk away.